So I have to get on another flight today, one of the innumerable flights that I take on a yearly basis. This time it's 8.5 plus hours from Vienna to Toronto. And the mission today on this flight is going to be to write an app from scratch from the time I take off to the time I land, to write that app without writing a line of code. Now, why is that important? It's important because I'm a CEO in my day job. I'm not a coder anymore. It's been 25 years since I've coded. So I'm going to lean into some agentic AI to see what's possible. So wish me luck.
So let's go straight for those who need the TLDR to the end. So what did they end up building, and what was the experience like? Well, on the right-hand side, you can see the app that I ended up creating called Safety Elephant. It's a disaster preparedness app, and it does a few things. One, in the top left-hand side here, you can see real-time alerts. These are actually faked at the moment because I didn't really have time to tie into FEMA or the Canadian equivalent for that. But you can filter it by distance, you can filter it by severity, and so on. On the right-hand side, you've got various checklists. So this is an emergency kit checklist, an evacuation guide, basic first aid tips, and so on. Then the map, which is real-time, although it's currently forced geolocated to New York, allows you to look up local resources. Those resources are not searched dynamically yet. They're just provided as a sample set. But this map works, and you can drill in to identify where local resources are. You've then got 3 one-click buttons, one to signal to your emergency contact list that you're okay, one to get an urgent call to you, and one to inform your emergency contacts that they are to call first responders. You also have your current location down here, so if you need to provide that to first responders, you can do so, and you can also locate the nearest EMS resources with a single click. At the bottom, there's an OpenAI powered first responder assistant, so you can go in here and you can ask for any help, right? So how do I clean a wound? And the first responder AI will go off and try to provide an answer. Now, to all my lawyer friends, I'm not shipping this app. This is not going to be providing any medical advice. This is more of a thought experiment to see if you could tie AI into the real world. So that's, I would say, probably in total maybe 6 hours of overall work. Obviously broken up with many things. Now, trying to do this on the plane was actually quite hard because the Wi-Fi on my particular flight was very spotty, and it kept losing context. So it became actually quite difficult to do this sometimes. There's a joke in here somewhere about being in the clouds and not being able to access the cloud, but I won't even pain you with that. So why don't we now go and take a look at how all of this got pulled together. So the first thing I did was I decided to start with Claude. Now, initially I was going to work entirely in the Replit agent, but the challenge was that I found Claude to actually be better at responding to some of my requests. And even though there was a little bit of overhead in terms of moving things back and forth between Claude and Replit, I found that, especially in an environment where things were a bit hit and miss in terms of Wi-Fi, a little bit safer. And what I did was I kept the entire context of this conversation. And Claude was very good at understanding what it had already told me. I read at the code level and so on. So this is what I gave it to begin with as a request. I said I want to build an app focused on disaster preparedness. I want to integrate real-time updates. And I will get to that, by the way. I haven't done that yet, but I will get to that. And then provide some preparedness resources, some mapping, some communication tools, and some educational content. And I suggested some possible data sources. I wanted the app to be user-friendly with relatively intuitive navigation. Eventually, I wanted it to have offline functionality as well, but for now, not. And so it came back, and it built me a basic React structure. It kind of fleshed out a UX, which was really nice actually, using mock data, so I could get a sample of what it might look like. And I was literally able to get this up and running in Replit in a matter of seconds. Because one of the things I asked for it, and you can see here, is to assume that I'm a Replit novice and provide me with detailed step-by-step instructions in terms of how to do this. And so it gave me literally step-by-step instructions of what to do. So what you learn about this process is that it works quite well in an iterative fashion. So if you kind of peel the onion of your app bit by bit, by not overcomplicating or not, delivering scope creep right up front, you end up with quite a solid and repeatable process whereby when you ask it to do something 9 times out of 10 it's going to work. Sometimes it's not going to work and you have to feed back the errors to the AI and it will correct them. But truly, it's like having a development department sitting right beside you, except the code comes back instantaneously. Now, I'm not going to argue about whether the code is high quality or mid quality or whatever. Certainly I wasn't stressing this with any deep tech. But it was pretty impressive actually what it was able to do. Now you got to remember that it's been, as I said, 25 years since I've coded, and I don't really have a good command of how a React.js app is structured, especially in a client-server environment where that can get a little tricky. So it was really interesting that I was able to follow along so well and get all of this done. Now, the caveat I would say is there were times where it was helpful that I had a basic understanding of structured programming and I had an understanding of how client-server apps communicated. I think if I hadn't had that understanding, I would have probably struggled to do this. But what I learned was, as I went through, I could ask it specific questions about how to build out the performance of this app, add new functionality, and so on. And the app would update for me literally in real time. There was almost no latency in getting the code back. So all in all, a pretty good experience, I think. What I'd like to try and do is spend more time with the Replit agent, which keeps all of this context itself and updates your code. And I think it's actually pretty good at what it does. In the end, I chose to stay with Claude just because it was easier for me to control, and I found that the code quality was slightly better if I was to guess. So all in all, this is real.